It was 2:31 p.m., and the mountains opened fire. Not a single shot, not a warning. 81 rockets, all at once, erupting from coastal positions like a swarm launch with singular purpose. The kind of barrage that doesn't ask questions. It answers them. Aboard 2 U.S. Navy destroyers operating in international waters off the Korean Peninsula, radar operators watched their screens explode with contacts. Not one signature appearing. Not two. Dozens. Cascading alerts that turned threat boards from green to red in seconds. The count climbed fast. 20 contacts. 40. 60. Then it locked at 81. 81 distinct trajectories, all ballistic, all converging on a single point in space, the exact coordinates currently occupied by the 2 American warships. This wasn't random fire. This wasn't a mistake. This was coordinated mass saturation, launched from multiple positions spread across 15 kilometers of North Korean coastline. Pre-planned, pre-targeted, executed with the kind of timing that only comes from rehearsal. The rockets were identified instantly. 240 millimeters and 300 millimeter systems, North Korea's long-range coastal artillery, designed specifically for one mission: kill ships at sea before they can respond. Each warhead packed enough high explosive to shred superstructures, crater decks, disable weapon systems, and turn radar arrays into shrapnel. 81 of them. That's not suppressive fire. That's erasure math. A quantity calculated to overwhelm point defenses through sheer volume. Force the defenders into impossible choices. Guarantee hits through statistical inevitability. If 10% penetrate, that's 8 warheads detonating against 2 ships. Enough to cripple both. Maybe sink one. North Korea had done the calculus, and they committed. The attack timing wasn't accidental either. The destroyers were operating close to territorial boundaries during routine freedom of navigation patrols, demonstrating international law. Maintaining presence, reminding adversaries that these waters don't belong to anyone. North Korea had waited for proximity, for maximum impact, for minimum response time, flight time from launch to impact, for minutes to detect, classify, engage, and eliminate 81 threats moving at supersonic speed toward 2 ships that couldn't outrun ballistic trajectories, even if they wanted to. There would be no maneuvering out of this. No diplomatic off-ramp. No time to request clarification or await authorization from higher command. The engagement window was already closing. Inside the destroyer's combat information centers, the transition from routine to combat happened without ceremony. Threat assessment systems didn't hesitate, didn't debate. They concluded. Hostile intent. Confirmed. Massive inbound salvo. Confirmed. Time for deliberation. 0. The 2 destroyers, operating in loose formation 3 kilometers apart, were now the targets of the largest coordinated artillery attack either crew had ever faced outside a simulation. But simulations use manageable numbers, 10 threats, maybe 20. Scenarios designed to challenge systems without overwhelming them. 81 was designed to overwhelm. Each rocket climbed toward apogee, shedding velocity as gravity fought thrust, then tipped over into terminal descent. The phase where speed builds again and trajectories become harder to predict. The phase where point defense gets expensive. In those first 30 seconds after launch, the mathematical truth settled over both ships with cold clarity. They had 4 minutes to stop 81 rockets, or some percentage of those warheads would arrive exactly where they were aimed. At the ships, at the crews, at the systems keeping both vessels operational. North Korea had fired everything they had within range. A barrage meant to saturate, to shock, to overwhelm through quantity, because quality wasn't guaranteed. But they'd made one critical miscalculation. They'd assumed defense was reactive, that ships would see the threat, and then scramble to respond. That 4 minutes wouldn't be enough time to coordinate an effective counter. They were wrong, because modern naval air defense doesn't react. It executes. And these systems have been watching those coastal batteries for hours, cataloging positions, tracking movements, waiting for exactly this kind of provocation. The rockets continued their climb, unaware that their launch signatures had already painted targets on every position that fired them, unaware that defense was already in motion, unaware that 4 minutes was more than enough time, not just to survive, but to respond. The barrage screamed toward the ships, 81 trails of smoke and fire converging like fate written in ballistics. But fate, it turned out, had math problems of its own, and the math was about to fail catastrophically. The moment the trajectories locked hostile, the ships stopped asking and started answering. Automated defense systems activated across both destroyers in perfect coordination, not because humans ordered it, but because the threat profile left no room for deliberation. Modern naval doctrine doesn't wait for permission. When 81 rockets are inbound, it executes. The Aegis combat systems have been awake long before the first rocket ignited. They've been watching, tracking, building target files on every known artillery position along that stretch of coastline for hours, cross-referencing radar signatures with infrared blooms, matching known North Korean installations with real-time surveillance data. When the launches occurred, the systems didn't scramble to locate the threat. They simply confirmed what they'd already cataloged. 81 rockets, for minutes to impact, defense authorization, automatic. The in/by. 1D radars locked onto the inbound salvo within seconds, their phased arrays tracking every rocket simultaneously, calculating intercept geometry faster than human operators could process the raw data. Firing solutions appeared on screens before anyone could request them. Target prioritization was instant. Closest threats first, highest density clusters second, outliers last. The defense unfolded in layers. 3 concentric rings of lethality, each designed to catch what the previous layer missed. No single system trusted to handle the entire problem. Redundancy through overlapping capability. The outer layer fired first. SM, 2 missiles erupted from vertical launch cells in rapid succession, 8 launches in 15 seconds, their rocket motors igniting in columns of white flame and billowing smoke that rolled across the deck. The missiles climbed steeply, accelerating toward the highest priority rocket clusters at supersonic speed. Engagement range, 35 kilometers. The SM-2s didn't need to score direct hits. Proximity was enough. Radar-guided fuses detonated warheads within lethal range of their targets, throwing expanding clouds of fragmentation that shredded rocket bodies mid-flight. Warheads tumbled unpowered toward the ocean. Debris scattered across kilometers of sky. First wave eliminated. 18 rockets down, but 63 were still coming. The middle layer engaged as the salvo closed inside 20 kilometers. ESSM missiles, smaller, faster, more maneuverable, rippled from their cells in coordinated pairs. These weren't long-range interceptors. They were knife fighters, designed for close-in engagements where reaction time matters more than range. They didn't miss. Intercept occurred in rapid succession, flashes of light blooming across the threat axis as rockets disintegrated under precision fire. Each ESSM took a target, confirmed kill, moved to the next. The system didn't celebrate. It cycled. Second wave eliminated. 31 more rockets destroyed. 14 left, closing fast. That's when the final layer activated. The Phalanx CIWS close-in weapon system, the last line of defense. Radar-controlled 20mm Gatling cannons that don't aim so much as create walls of projectiles in the path of incoming threats. 3,000 rounds per minute. Tungsten core penetrators moving at supersonic velocity. The sound was unmistakable, not individual shots. A sustained roar, like tearing metal at industrial scale. The Phalanx turrets tracked and fired with robotic precision, their barrels glowing orange from sustained fire. Tracer rounds lit the sky in brilliant streams, walking onto targets with computer-corrected accuracy no human gunner could replicate under pressure. The remaining rockets entered the engagement zone and disintegrated, fragmented bodies tumbling, warheads detonating harmlessly in midair, debris splashing into the ocean hundreds of meters short of ships. Total engagement time, 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Total rockets fired at the destroyers, 81. Total rockets intercepted, 81. Total penetration, 0. The defensive fire ceased. Turrets rotated back to neutral. Launch cells cycled to standby. Radar systems continued tracking, confirming no additional threats inbound. In the combat information centers, operators exhaled for the first time since alerts began. Screens showed clear airspace. Threat boards returned to green. The ships hadn't altered course, hadn't changed speed, hadn't deviated from their patrol route by a single degree. They simply defended. Perfectly, automatically, overwhelmingly. Debris rained across 20 kilometers of ocean. Twisted metal, spent rocket motors, shattered warheads that never reached their targets. Evidence of a saturation attack that failed to saturate anything. North Korea had fired everything within range, committed to overwhelming two ships through sheer numbers. And the ships hadn't even noticed enough to change course. But while defensive systems were shredding the inbound barrage, something else was happening. Something the rocket crews on those coastal mountains had no way of knowing. Every launch signature had been recorded, every trajectory traced back to its origin, every firing position cataloged with precision measured in meters. Defense had worked. Now attribution was complete, and response was already in motion. While the sky was still full of intercepted rockets, the real work had already begun. The same radar systems that tracked incoming threats were simultaneously doing something North Korea hadn't anticipated. They were tracking backward. Every rocket trajectory painted a line, launch point a target. And math doesn't care which direction you read it. The Aegis systems calculated back trajectories in real time, using velocity, ballistic profile, wind correction, and flight path to determine exact launch origins. Not approximate positions, not general areas. Coordinates precise enough to drop a warhead through a window. Counter-battery radar doesn't just defend. It attributes. It answers a question that matters most. Where did that come from? And the answer was building itself automatically. Within 90 seconds of the first rocket launch, both destroyers had compiled a complete target list. 27 distinct artillery positions spread across the North Korean coastal mountains. Mobile launchers caught in firing positions. Hardened bunkers carved into rock faces. Support facilities that enabled the barrage. Each position tagged. Each location verified through cross-reference with existing intelligence databases. Each target confirmed as active military infrastructure rather than civilian proximity risk. The data wasn't guesswork. It was geometry and physics rendered into targeting coordinates. At 2:36 p.m., 5 minutes after the attack began, authorization came through encrypted channels. Brief, direct, unambiguous, cleared hot, execute counter-battery response. But the tactical execution was already in motion before the authorization arrived. Because modern warfare at sea doesn't wait for approval to prepare, it waits for approval to fire. And everything before that moment is just positioning. The destroyer's vertical launch systems have been cycling through pre-launch sequences since the threat assessment confirmed hostile intent. Tomahawk cruise missiles loaded in their cells, guidance systems receiving target coordinates, flight profiles uploading into navigation computers. 27 targets, 27 missiles, one for each position that had participated in the barrage. The first Tomahawk launched at 2:36 p.m. The cell cover blew open. The booster motor ignited. The missile erupted upward in a column of fire and pressure, clearing the deck in a vertical climb before its wings deployed, and it banked hard toward the coastline. Then the second, then the third. Every 8 seconds, another launch. Another missile transitioning from vertical boost to horizontal cruise flight. Another weapon committing to a target it would reach in 30-something minutes. The launches were methodical, controlled, relentless. No panic, no rush, just systematic weapons released following a target list that had been generated faster than the rocket barrage itself had flown. By 2:43 p.m., all 27 Tomahawks were in flight. They skimmed low over the water, barely 50 meters above the surface, flying subsonic but quiet. Terrain-hugging profiles designed to exploit radar horizon limitations and minimize detection windows. Each missile carried a 1,000-pound high-explosive warhead, enough to obliterate a mobile launcher, enough to collapse a hardened bunker, enough to ensure that whatever fired from that position wouldn't fire again. The cruise missiles flew autonomous profiles, GPS-guided, terrain matching, self-navigating through pre-programmed waypoints that kept them below radar coverage until terminal approach. They required no further input from the ships that launched them. No updates, no corrections, They simply flew toward coordinates that had been burned into their guidance systems, carrying consequences that had been calculated the moment North Korea decided to fire. Flight time, 33 to 39 minutes depending on target distance. Estimated impact, 3:09 p.m. to 3:15 p.m. The destroyers resumed their patrol course. Speed unchanged, heading unchanged. As if the engagement had been routine rather than the largest artillery attack either ship had faced in active service. Inside the CICs, operators monitored Tomahawk flight data. Green tracks moving steadily toward the coast. No malfunctions, no intercepts. Clean profiles all the way to target. On the North Korean coast, artillery crews who had just launched 81 rockets were going about post-fire procedures, reloading, repositioning, celebrating, maybe if they thought the barrage had achieved anything. They had no way of knowing their positions had been located within seconds of firing. No way of knowing precision-guided payloads were already crossing the water toward them. No way of knowing that response time in modern naval warfare isn't measured in hours or days. It's measured in the flight time of a cruise missile. And that clock was already counting down. 37 minutes remaining. 36, 35. The Tomahawks flew on, silent and patient, carrying a message written in high explosive and delivered with mathematical certainty. You fired first. We fired last. At 3:09 p.m., the mountains answered for what they'd done. 27 Tomahawk cruise missiles arrived over North Korean coastal positions within a 6-minute window, 38 to 44 minutes after the artillery barrage that had provoked them. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was coordinated. Despite varying flight distances, despite different terrain profiles, despite independent navigation systems, the missiles converged on their targets in near-simultaneous strikes, ensuring no launch crew received warning from adjacent explosions. No time to evacuate. No opportunity to relocate equipment or disperse. The first impacts came at 3:09 p.m. Mobile launchers caught in the open, vehicles still positioned near firing sites, crews conducting post-launch procedures were obliterated by precision strikes that arrived without warning. One moment, routine operations. The next, 1,000-pound warheads detonating directly overhead. Trucks vaporized. Launcher systems shredded into unrecognizable scrap. Craters punched into earth where artillery pieces had stood seconds before. Then the hardened positions. Bunkers carved into mountain faces. Reinforced concrete, meters of rock overhead, designed to survive conventional bombardment, were penetrated by missiles that didn't need to break through. They detonated at tunnel mouths, inside firing chambers, against ammunition storage that turned defensive structures into tombs. Secondary explosions followed as stored rocket propellant ignited. Ammunition cooked off in chain reactions. Bunkers collapsed inward as blast overpressure exceeded structural limits. By 3:12 p.m., 14 positions had been eliminated. By 3:15 p.m., all 27 were confirmed destroyed. The strikes were surgical but absolute. Each target received exactly one missile. No overkill, no redundancy. Just precise application of force calculated to ensure the artillery systems that fired those 81 rockets would never fire again. Support facilities went next, ammunition depots erupting in fireballs that rolled hundreds of meters into the sky. Command posts reduced to rubble, radar installations shattered into electronic debris. The infrastructure that enabled the barrage was systematically erased. North Korean air defenses engaged some of the incoming Tomahawks. Surface-to-air missiles launched. Anti-aircraft guns tracked and fired. But low-altitude cruise missiles flying terrain mass profiles are nightmare targets for systems designed to engage high-altitude bombers. A few Tomahawks were intercepted. Most weren't, and most was enough. By 3:15 p.m., the counter-battery response was complete. 27 military targets eliminated across 15 kilometers of coastline. No strikes on civilian infrastructure. No collateral damage to nearby villages. No casualties beyond military personnel who had participated in the attack. The destruction was total within its scope, but the scope was disciplined. The 2 U.S. destroyers continued their patrol route. Same course, same speed, Same mission profile. The engagement hadn't altered their operations by a single degree of heading. No additional artillery fire followed from North Korean positions. The capability that had launched 81 rockets 30 minutes earlier no longer existed in functional form. Silence settled over the coastal mountains. Not the silence of restraint, the silence of elimination. North Korea had demonstrated willingness to attack U.S. naval vessels with overwhelming firepower. The United States had demonstrated ability to survive that firepower completely, attribute every firing position instantly, and eliminate those positions faster than they could be relocated or reinforced. The strategic equation had been rewritten, not through threats, through execution. Future artillery attacks would now carry a certainty. Every launcher used would be destroyed within the hour. The cost-benefit analysis of saturation tactics had fundamentally shifted. You could fire, but you'd pay for it in infrastructure you couldn't quickly replace. In the hours after, satellite imagery confirmed the devastation. 27 positions showing blast damage, ongoing fires, collapsed structures. Some sites burned for hours as ammunition stocks continued detonating. The engagement entered military analysis as counter-battery doctrine and practice, where defense pairs with attribution, where attacking reveals you for elimination. The destroyers sailed on, unharmed, undeterred, continuing operations as if 81 rockets had been nothing more than weather. Behind them, smoke rose from coastal mountains where artillery systems had learned an expensive lesson. You can shoot first, but modern warfare decides who shoots last. And last is what matters.